The presentations, which were symmetrical, that my colleague Olga Davidson and I, Gregory Nagy, have offered to you are intended ultimately for a book project, or maybe a twin book project, involving the 11 Lives of Homer texts that I work with, and the 4 Lives of Ferdowsi texts that Olga, aka Holly, works with. And the two of them together, I think, add up to a very interesting comparative perspective on what it is to be reading life of poet traditions. Often I say lives of poet traditions or life of poet traditions, it doesn't matter. The important thing is that clearly what is being said in these stories is not historical fact. What is a historical fact is the telling of the stories in the context of societies that are actually experiencing, in my case, the poetry of Homer, in Olga Davidson's case, the poetry of Ferdowsi. These narratives are historical fact. What they're saying is not historical fact, but the beauty of it is that even if we consider the lives of Homer and the lives of Ferdowsi to be myths, these myths, in their telling, are historical evidence for reception. When it comes to my research on the lives of Homer, so far I've concentrated in my years of studying this textual tradition on Vita 1 and Vita 2, which are the most complicated of the 11 texts. And it has taken me eternities to get as far as I have. I have one version that I presented in Paris where I concentrated only on Vita 1 and Vita 2. Then there's another version which came out in a book published in 2010 called Homer the Pre-Classic. And the list goes on. I've tried different perspectives on these very complicated texts at different times. But then I said to Holly, why don't we combine the work we've been doing? And it's been work that has gone on for decades for me.
I think that one of the things that I've had to do with my my scholarship is that it was new for Ferdowsi scholars to think of oral poetics.
Yes.
I come to it from classics. I was a classics undergraduate. I did study with Albert Lord. Never studied with my husband. I just wanted to put that on record.
Yes.
But I think that the part that was exciting for me is just reading the old preface and realize that the old preface was telling a story that was exactly in the Shahnameh. And then I can't remember, we sort of started this together because I was mumbling about, look, this is the same story, except they just put names and tried to make these figures historical in the older preface. And there it's very much of a metaphor in the actual text of Ferdowsi. And so to me, it was such a wonderful observation, and it met with some resistance, but not too much. And then I've always had luck because you had to undo years and years and years of scholarship. And whereas there hasn't been as long of a tradition, at least in the West, of scholarship of Ferdowsi, so I've been a little bit freer.
Yes, I would agree that in your case, there's less resistance to the idea that lives of the poets can be mined for historical evidence
Actually,
about
I
reception.
beg to difference.
All
People
right.
like to write books and personalize Ferdowsi,
Well, true.
whether he was truly sad because his own son had died. That's why he got all the
that's
emotions for Sohrab, etc. and so forth.
So true.
So there's a lot of personalization.
So your field has that problem too, where people take literally everything that these lives of poets say, or they take it as pure invention.
Yeah.
My problem in classics is more the second kind of resistance, where whatever is said in Lives of Homer is treated simply as fiction. And for me, fiction is something very different from myth. As I see myth, it's a traditional society's way of encoding truth values. When it comes to fiction, it's one individual making things up and not caring whether the things that are made up fit tradition or not. So for that reason, I resist the idea, and I've gone on record saying it, that the lives of Homer and the lives of other poets, Greek traditions are full of these things. It's not just Homer, but the idea that the lives of Homer are fictions, I've resisted that, and that is why in the presentations that we offered, we emphasize anthropological approaches to the value of these narratives, the lives of Homer and the lives of Ferdowsi. And you notice even now I keep switching from life to lives, simply because each community has its own version of the life of a given poet.
Aren't your lives of Homer in little bits of fragments? They're not really straight narratives, or is that not the case?
Well, when it comes to Vita 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, they are fragmentary, very fragmentary, or the result of encyclopedia entries.
Right.
Like one of these entries is in the big Byzantine encyclopedia, and it really compresses a lot of tradition in a post-Panathenaic way, as I called it. Vita 1 and Vita 2, however, are fairly good narratives. So that's one of the other reasons I concentrated on V1 and V2, because they are so relatively full in detail. And yes, there's excerpting going on even there, but it's pretty good. I would compare the Baisonguri preface, which goes on and on and on about the life of Ferdowsi from so many different traditions. So of all the texts that we're comparing with each other, I'd say that one is most comparable to the best that I have, which is Vita 1 and Vita 2.
But what's beautiful with us, the Ferdowsi people, is that it's attached to an actual manuscript.
Oh,
that is the best part.
that
you have
is
the
a luxury,
manuscripts,
yeah.
and it's setting up the manuscript, the patron, and everything in one go. And you, poor Homerists, have all these fragments to deal with. As I've always said,
true.
if you love the Iliad and the Odyssey, try the Shahnameh. It's the Iliad and the Odyssey and the whole epic cycle. Nothing's lost.
Yes, I think that's a good analogy, and I envy you. I envy you. Of course, we're many, many centuries apart.
True.
I'm not talking about the years that separate us. I'm talking about the centuries
That's true.
that separate Homeric poetry, which a lot of people would date to 8th, 7th centuries BCE, and here you are in the 10th century CE, and the lives that are based on that kind of tradition are even later.
That's true.
So, lucky you.
Lucky me indeed.